Hey, this is video take 2 for Unit 0 and Unit 1, pacing and planning. The first video I had, the sound didn't work, so I'm re-recording it for you. So let's go ahead to our folder for APSI 2020 resources for participants, and let's click the CED resources by unit. So we have our 9 units from the CED, and we also have a Unit 0. So Unit 0 is optional. Some APES teachers like to go over a few of the things that can be covered later in the year. They like to do them first. And so I have an example of things that you could do first if you wanted to. You don't have to. So let's take a look at the Lorax. That's the original Lorax. I actually show it when we study forestry, but you could show it at the beginning of the year. I do a math diagnostic at the beginning of the year, so I describe the whole math diagnostic here on my website and how I use a diagnostic, and then students will get a folder of their individual math practice. And all of those review sheets and keys and videos, there's a link for Teacher Pay Teacher, but don't go to that link because I have it for you in the drive, so don't buy anything. And so you have all of that. So what I do is I make folders for my students, and I put in only the things that they diagnosed as their weaknesses: percent change, metric conversions, scientific notation, that kind of thing. Half-life calculations, which may or may not have been covered in chemistry. And then when we do a math day, they go to their folder and they do one of the math review papers, and then they self-correct with keys or they watch my videos for help. And so for the first couple of months of school, about every other week, we'll do a math day in class because I flip so I have time. If you don't flip, you could do the math review worksheets at home, because you also have access to my full video library, so you could show them my videos if you didn't want to record your own. Once students are done with their review papers, and some students don't need any review papers, so they're going to go right to practice FRQs that have math in them. So I tell kids, don't be faulty on their diagnostic, because then you will end up doing math that's too hard for you without reviewing things. So the total packet is here, math, differentiated math here, and it explains the system in this file. The diagnostic is here, and the key is here. And then the kids fill in a Google form, which you have here. Now in Google Forms, you can't actually make a copy. It doesn't work. So you'll have to, unfortunately, retype it, because the only way I can let you make a copy is to give you editor rights. And then what happens is it ends up disappearing from the file because somebody accidentally moves the file. So Google Forms is kind of faulty in that way, in that you can't actually make a copy of it without having editing rights. Okay, so that's Unit 0. And then human footprint, there's a worksheet in the drive, but this is the link to the calculator. So I like to do this first. It's covered later in the year in, I believe, Unit 5, but you can do this the first week. So the kids take a calculator. They can log in with their school email, so they don't have to give their personal email. And then they answer some questions to do their ecological footprint. Tragedy of the Commons, sometimes I do at the beginning of the year. Sometimes I wait until it's covered in Unit 5. I think I'm going to go back to the beginning of the year because it's a fun thing to start with. I wrote about it here in my website, and you have the links to all the worksheets too. So if you want to see pictures and how to run it, and then here's a video here of showing how the simulation is run. I believe for about 20 minutes of the simulation, you can watch one of my groups and how they fish and how I replenish the ocean. There's some other things in here too. There is some HHMI. So HHMI is Howard Hughes Medical Institute, and they have a bunch of educational resources under their Bio Interactive program. They have one called Scientist Role Models. Think like a scientist, asking scientific questions, human impact on the environment. And so these are things that can be done with remote learning or regular learning. So some of you, like the first week, you don't want to do anything meaty because kids are coming in and out of your classes. So I recommend not doing Tragedy of the Commons because it's actually a concept they need to know. So if they miss it in the first week, then that's hard for them to understand the concept later on. My students don't move around too much after the first 3 days, so then I can do Tragedy of the Common on about the 4th day. So let's go ahead and take a look at my pacing plan. So in each of your folders, the first item that I label number 1 is the spreadsheet with your resources. Number 2 is your Edpuzzles. So I have Edpuzzle links for you here. And then the third item is a pacing plan. I don't have it for all the units, but I have it for a few of them. So this is a pacing sample for the first weeks of school. First day stuff, whatever you like to do on the first day. Sometimes you like to play a game or bingo or whatever you like to play. And then the next day I do a lab safety scavenger hunt, and so I have to do lab safety for a day, so I do it there. And then on Wednesday I have them enroll in Google Classroom because classes are changed the first couple days. So by Wednesday usually there's not that many changes, so let's pop them into Google Classroom. And then we do human footprint. I actually do the worksheet as a Google Doc. So I give you the worksheet here for human footprint with that website where they calculate their human footprint, and then they answer a lot of questions. And that is something, where am I? Here's the pacing sample. So we're right here, human footprint. And then that is something that can be done also for remote learning. For remote learning, if there's no lab safety you have to do, you can throw in one of these HHMI resources. Tragedy of the Commons I'm going to do here on the Thursday, so the 4th day of school. We actually don't start Monday, we start on a Tuesday, so everything would be shifted for me, but that's beside the point. So this is the Tragedy of the Commons lab, and it basically explains, or the concept that students are supposed to learn is that shared resources end up becoming depleted, so without laws and regulations. There is an online simulation. The lab in the Google Drive needs to be revised for the online simulation, but I did give you that online simulation here. There's a link. So if I'm doing remote learning, then I'm going to have to rewrite some of my lab, not all of it, but some of my lab to use this remote learning version of it. And you can wait. So let's say you're new and you don't know how to quite rewrite the lab for the remote. That's okay. Wait and do Tragedy of the Commons in Unit 5 if you're distance learning, and do these other stuff first. Okay. Then I go on to accessing Edpuzzle in class. So what I find with all my online platforms that I use, not just for my online class I teach on the side for a private school, but for my public school kids, is that every new piece of technology, we access it first in class. So even though Edpuzzle is going to be mostly homework in a flipped classroom, I want them to get into it so I can troubleshoot. And the biggest problem with Edpuzzle is kids are using their personal Gmail instead of their school account to log in, or a personal email instead of their school Gmail to log in, because we're a Google school. So what I do is once they're in Google Classroom will upload the rosters into Edpuzzle, and so they should already be in my class once they log in with their school email to Edpuzzle. So we just troubleshoot that a little bit in class, and then I also have them try it on their phones too, so they can check the app and make sure they're logging in correctly with the app. Okay, And then on the following Monday, we do the math diagnostic. So I give them 1 period because some students will take 2 hours because they're trying to get it right. But that's not the point. The point is to check their weaknesses. So I tell them you only have 45 minutes. And if you don't finish certain questions, you know that's a weakness on your assignment. For remote learning, I would give it to them too, but there wouldn't be a time limit, but I'm going to encourage them that they need their work to be authentic. And if you don't know how to do something, that's okay. Don't do it on the diagnostic. You don't have to answer everything that's on the diagnostic. You just know that that's a weakness. And so when it comes to self-correcting the diagnostic and filling in the Google form, then hopefully they're authentic with their answers. So my Google form, they're going to fill in themselves and diagnose their weaknesses, and I tell them I can overwrite it. I put a birthday cake just to make math more fun because some kids don't like math. Kind of ironic. Okay, so how many wrong answers did they get on practicing division? How many did they get on percentages, scientific notation, percent? Oh, division seems like it's easy, but a few kids forget how to divide even using a calculator. So because the problems are written more as word problems, not necessarily like divide this and this. If it was this, 36 divided by 5, they could just plug that in their calculator. But when you put it into words, some of them don't know what to do. So I only have a handful that needs that practice paper, but for that handful, it's an important thing that they need to practice. Metric conversions, half-life, word problems, and so they're going to check off the items that they need to work on. And I have them explain discrepancies. So for example, if they got most of their metric conversions wrong, but they didn't mark it as something to review, explain why. Some of them say, oh, it's just a dumb mistake. I totally got it. I forgot that this conversion was this conversion, and I'm good at metric conversions. But I tell them I can override any of their decisions, and I can pop in any of these things that I want to in their folders for them. So that's my math diagnostic paper for differentiated math. And then the self-correcting and diagnostic should take about half the period, and then we enroll in my online portal in class together because they have to go through this sign-up process, and then they can start doing a reading quiz for chapter 1. So let's talk about chapter 1. So the homework I have way up here in the first day is read the intro chapter in your textbook. So most of your textbooks, so even if you're going to follow the order of the CED, most of your textbooks are going to have an introductory chapter to the course that you can assign this week for them to read. And then about a week later, I'm going to give them their reading questions on that. And they're going to be super easy just to get them used to this online portal for online quizzes. So my online portal is called Mastering. And then I'm going to go into my next chapter or my next unit. So go in, if you decide to go in the order of your textbook, go into chapter 2. If you decide to go to unit 1 first, start unit 1. If you decide to start unit 4 first, start unit 4. So that is the week 0 sample pacing for you. And again, you can do any of this stuff. Don't feel like you have to follow my pacing. Work it for your students, your schools, your technology, your community, whatever works for you. Also, some teachers kind of do half traditional, half flipped. So some notes in class and then some flipped. I actually do a little bit of notes in class, but it's not in place of flipped. So they do their flipped reading and stuff and notes at home. But then I also, some of the harder things, we make charts and doodle notes in class to emphasize and help them with that. Those harder concepts. Okay, so let's go back to the CED folder and let's go into Unit 1. First, I'm going to get out of some of these tabs. I've got lots of tabs open. Okay. Now let's go into Unit 1. And in Unit 1, I have a whole folder for eco columns here. And then in Unit 1, I have my spreadsheet of all your resources. Some things are hyperlinked, some are not. So let's take a look at the folder again. So this is the folder. Sometimes things are hyperlinked like this video If it's underlined, it has a hyperlink. I put everything in green for the things that I do so that you know I don't do everything. I don't have experience with everything that I put on here, especially a lot of the distance learning labs for remote learning. Some of the things I've done already with my online class, some of the things I haven't. So I popped them in here to show you what you could do if we went all online learning. Okay, so when there is a link, I put in a link for you. So here's a video that's about a half an hour that's a really good introduction to ecology with E.O. Wilson in Gorongosa National Park in Africa. And if there's no link, then it's in the folder. So for example, biome chart, I do it, it's green, it's in the folder. Actually, everything on the spreadsheet is either in the folder or linked. So the biome chart should be in here, and it's not. I'm going to put it in here. So I made these folders over the past couple of months, and on occasion I forgot to put something in. So if you see that's the case, please ask me for it. I do have that biome chart. I'm going to put it in here. Okay, so the other items like coastal wetlands reading should be in here. There it is. Okay, coastal wetlands reading here, and the questions here. So again, if you see an omission, please let me know and I will fix it. Okay, so some items in here I don't own and I can't give you the rights to them. So sometimes a link will take you to the place to buy it. So example, this is estuaries. This is origami estuaries. And so you can buy the digital copy for $5.99, which I may actually do. And it's something that I could send home with remote learning. My students have trouble with estuaries because in Southern California, there's not that many of them, although we are about an hour from the coast, so my kids do visit the ocean, but not usually estuaries. So they lack knowledge, and I thought this might be kind of fun. You know, in AP, I don't want to give too many like coloring or things like that. And if I do, I explain to them how our brains learn. So before I give something like this out, I'm going to tell them, look, I know it's cutting and taping together, but as you do it, you're creating brain synapses so that you'll understand this concept better. So when I explain it by the science and the neurons, they're much more receptive at the AP level to doing things like this, at least my AP kids. There's a couple of things in here also that I don't own that I found on Teacher Pay Teacher, like this nitrogen cycle sketch notes. So I put that in there. I bought it, I use it, but I don't have the rights to it, so I can't put it in the folder for you. And then there's most everything in here is absolutely free. It's in my folder or it's a free link. So like this virtual lab from ESRI, which is kind of like a site that uses geomapping. They have a lot of free materials. So almost everything in here is just a couple of things I don't own that that I use, that I put the links on that you have to pay for. Everything else is free. Exploring Biomes in Gorongosa National Park is free. Okay, and the worksheets are here. Student worksheet, teacher worksheet. So this is something I put in for remote learning for biomes, and I've used it before in my online class, sometimes, not every year, depending on time. I would not give them this link. I would give them directly the PDF or a printed copy, if you're allowed to give them printed copies with remote learning. Because if you give them this website, they're going to go directly to the educator PDF and get the answers. So do not give them this link. That link is only for you. So let's take a look at what I planned for pacing for this unit. Okay, so at the beginning of the pacing, I said that This plan excludes beginning of the year stuff, which I then called Unit 0. I don't do at the beginning of the year any scientific method review, any graphing practice, because I work those in context. We practice graphing when we do labs with graphing. We practice scientific method when we do labs that are controlled labs with scientific method. And not every lab is like that. So I teach it in context. Okay, so the first day I would set up eco columns in traditional and flipped. And the eco columns is going to be my main lab for ecology, units 1 and 2, but there's like way more than that. There's connections to soil later in chapter 4. There's connections later on to pollution in the ocean and aquatic ecosystems later on in unit 5 with eco columns. So there's huge amounts of content covered in eco columns if you're purposeful with it, with the science. For remote, depending on your state, you could or could not do eco columns at home, or have a smaller bio bottle to make observations. In California, that's not something I can do. I can't require kids to purchase things. So instead, I would focus on using the Gore and Gosa resources from HHMI. So their first day, they're going to watch the guide, which is that video, about a half an hour. And then notes are on video at home. You can make them read at home. You can have them do puzzles as well. And then the next activity is exploring Biome 1. And then I'm going to work in a math review day here, if time. Eco columns, if they take a 2 full periods, then you won't have time for a math review day that day. Sometimes my folders aren't ready by this point because I have so many students. I have 168 students. It takes me about a week and a half to put all their folders together with all of their papers. And I have student service help me, but it still takes a long time. So my folders may or may not be ready to do one math review paper. So math review paper usually takes like 20 minutes to a half an hour to do. If you're doing the traditional way and you're going to do notes in class, I have math review mostly as homework. You'll see here I put in the topic questions. So the topic questions are extra questions on AP Classroom that are formative assessment. So I put them in here. You can see I put them in here. For flipped, I'm going to embed them in my reading quizzes as part of the reading quiz. So a couple questions will be formative and the rest summative. Setting up eco columns can take 2 full days, or it could take a day and a half. If you have the method where they burn the holes in the lids, it will take 2 full days. If you have the method where you're going to use a screen door for the drainage, screen door material, then it will go quicker. But the kids love to burn things, so burning holes is fun for them. So I'm not sure. I just learned about the screen door method, so I'm not quite sure what I will do. Then you can see we go into a biome chart, which I will pop in the drive for you. And then what else do I want to point out? Eco column notes. So you have a PowerPoint of notes, and I fit these in chapter 1 because it covers unit 1 because it covers a lot of these topics on ecology. And they need to know what's happening, the science that's happening in their eco columns as well. There's a virtual lab called the Nitrogen Cycle Challenge that you can give if you are doing remote. You can do it in class too, but you probably won't have time with eco columns. And then you have some doodle notes here. I also put it in traditional. I'm building those right now, so they're not quite ready yet because I am building them. And then here we're going to add bugs and leaf litter to eco columns, and we're going to take data. So after your seeds start sprouting, after about a week, you can add detritivores to your eco columns. So worms and pill bugs, roly-polies, pincher bugs, no caterpillars, nothing that will eat your plants. And then leaf litter for them to hide, and then we can, my students don't have forest. They have no idea. They don't even know what leaf litter means. I know it sounds crazy for those of you who live in forested areas, but leaf litter is a vocabulary word I have to teach them in my students because we live in the chaparral biome, and so we don't have forests here. Okay, then if you're teaching remote, you might do this chart, which also I have a chart here. You might do that on video. You'll notice the chart does not appear under traditional. I have the doodle notes, but I don't have the chart, and that's because there's not enough time. So if you wanted to do the chart as well, you could, under traditional even, assign some readings at home, so you don't need to necessarily do notes on everything in class. You'll notice also this activity, which is really lovely for productivity. And I explained it in the Google Drive in the lab folder. There's a video of me showing you the materials. That's one I skip in traditional because of lack of time. And that's okay. You have to figure that out for your whole school and community, whether flipped or traditional works for you. There's also a GPP, NPP, so this is gross primary production and net primary productivity. I did this lab. Now it's like a 2 or 3 day lab, but I don't have time. So I kind of did it in a 25-minute, I think, video. So you can do that remote. I do it for homework in my flipped. You can do it for homework in your traditional if the kids have video access. The light and the deep sea activity, they're really simple materials, and in the video I describe for you the materials. You could send them home with students for remote learning if you're allowed to send home materials. Let me show you where that is. So the lab is going to be in Unit 1 folder, but I described the lab here in our lab videos and instruction folder. So here's all of the explaining the lab stuff. So I put that in here, light in the deep sea. And so this is my introduction to the lab with the links for how to do it. So watch this video for tips on materials needed. So this video will explain to you how this lab is done. And it's really quick. It's only about 3 minutes where I show the materials in this video. Okay, going on, because I know I'm taking a long time. We're going to do some more drawing notes that are still being developed. They're not ready yet, but my students had a lot. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I do trophic level drawing notes already. I actually have those on video for absent kids. So I have those on my Edpuzzle links. And then we get to the Owl Pellet Lab. On the Owl Pellet Lab in the flipped model, I give 2 days so they can do their questions together with groups. In the traditional, it's 1 day with the lab report at home. There is a virtual owl pellet, so I'm going to adapt my lab to have the kids do. It's really simple. They just sort of scratch off the owl pellet to reveal the bones and then place them over here. So they just kind of get this little virtual owl pellet, but then the math is going to be the same, and they're going to have to crunch the numbers on the math for remote learning. Okay, 2 weeks later after building your initial eco column, you're going to build the aquatic chamber with the fish, but you don't add fish for a couple of days, and I actually forgot to put that on here. You add fish 2 days later. So I'm going to put eco columns, add fish. So you build the aquatic chamber first, and then you can't do the fish for a couple more days because you have to let the water be colonized by nitrifying bacteria. And that's all in the notes. That's all in the teacher's guide for you, things like that for eco columns. That's in our folder. Okay, we're going to enroll in AP Classroom in class. You could have them do it at home if you needed to, but again, enrolling into a new online platform is sometimes better done in person with students to troubleshoot. And then I will have them do, after they add their fish, I'm going to have them do their personal progress check, multiple choice questions for Unit 1, and then send the FRQ home. The next day we'll go over the FRQ in class. For traditional, you'll probably assign both of them at home because you don't have as much time. And then a review game, some more topic questions for review or bell ringers. I assigned Bozeman Science Ed Puzzles for review, and I put those in your Ed Puzzle lists as well. And then I would give the exam. So hopefully going through here, I know I went through it really fast because I didn't want the video to be really, really long. So this gives you some ideas on how you can pace out Unit 1 to make it last in the 3 weeks. You'll notice from here that, less than half, well, maybe about half of things I actually do because you just don't have time for them. When I'm doing my classes in class, I really don't have time for all these wonderful HHMI, GOR, and GOSA resources. They're wonderful, but I just don't have time. Okay, so hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions about planning and pacing for Unit 1.